Hi there, my name's Stefan Fusenich and welcome to today's webinar on TVET specifics, issues and challenges that managers might face. So in today's webinar we're going to look at a range of challenges and issues that are faced by TVET institutions and try and come up with a manager's toolkit of possible solutions that you might apply to help you with when you're faced with these challenges. So let's have a look a little bit more detail about what we're going to talk about today. So in today's webinar, we're going to focus on the purpose and impact of TVET education. We're also going to look to make sure that we understand the challenges that centre managers must tackle to improve the outcomes and quality of education on TVET programmes. We'll also identify ways and strategies to deal with and overcome the issues and challenges that are faced by many TVET providers. So throughout this webinar, we're going to be talking about sort of the research that's been found that affects not just the Caribbean, but other TVET providers in the developing world. So we're going to look at some research and look at some of the things that are found that TVET often faces as a challenge. And we're going to be coming up with what we call the manager's toolkit, which will be some practical solutions that you may wish to apply. They aren't a to-do list. There's some ideas that you could possibly implement yourself if you're interested, or that you might not have thought of. So you may have other ideas and other solutions that you've already been implementing to some of these challenges that we're going to talk about. And if you have, that's brilliant, and share those ideas with others, because that's what will help us get through past these issues and challenges as we're dealing with TVET education. So within this webinar, like I said, this has come from the research findings, some of it from research that I've done, and over my time I've been working with providers that I've seen, and also some of the research that's been done more recently about specifically TVET. We're looking at some of the issues that are faced that have been identified in research done in Trinidad, in research that's been done in St. Lucia, some that's been done in Grenada, and some that's been done just generally in TVET as well. So we're looking at some of the findings of those reports and talking about how they give us a key idea about some of the issues that have been faced generically across all of TVET and what we can do to help ourselves and when we're working to try and deal with some of these challenges. So if we look more closely at TVET in the Caribbean, the TVET Caribbean sector is geared towards countering diverse challenges, including a shortage of a skilled workforce, some skills mismatches in the labour market, high youth unemployment, actual immigration of skilled labour, and the climate and environmental vulnerability of the islands. So TVET plays a major part in enabling the islands to carry on working, to carry on providing the skills that we need to enable us to run the islands effectively. So as skilled labour leaves, it's important that we continue to develop skilled people that can undertake those roles so that we're not left with gaps, which we're seeing at the moment. So it's really important. TVET plays a vital role in the strategic direction of making sure we've got skilled labour on the islands, but also in terms of improving employment rates and making sure that where there are skills mismatches, where people actually don't quite have the skills that we need them to for the jobs that they're doing. So the TVET in the Caribbean, does have a particular role to play, and that's what really the role is at the moment in the area. So, like I said, why is it so important? Well, I think what comes to mind is from what I've been discussing with people is, when we talked about TVET, even back in 1997, we talked about the idea of a CARICOM citizen or worker that was put together by heads, and this still rings true very much today in terms of the types of things that we want TVET to do and why TVET is so important. So when we talk about the citizen or worker for the CARICOM, I think that the 5 things that are identified here still play a vitally important part now. So a CARICOM citizen or worker being able to seize the economic opportunities that a global environment is presenting. Now, being able to travel with your work within the CARICOM is ideal for some students, and maybe that will what some people want to do. So actually being skilled will allow you to seize those opportunities. Developing and demonstrating multiple literacies, including language, independence, and critical thinking. Now, we still need people to have multiple literacies. Although some of these things may have changed now, they're still vitally important. Also about the opportunity to control, maintain, and improve your physical, mental, social, and spiritual well-being, alongside contributing to the health and well-being of your community and country, are vital parts of what we want TVET to do in terms of developing both technical and soft skills. Now, the other part about nourishing him or her and the full development of each person's potential without gender stereotyping and embracing the differences and similarities between males and females as a source of strength. Now, we talked there about equal opportunities, and that's really what TVET enhances, the opportunity for people to do what they can do and to undertake what they would like to in terms of skills training. And in terms of respect for heritage and culture of that of others, this comes through loud and clear in the role of soft skills development in TVET. So really importantly, we're developing not just workers, but we are developing citizens through TVET as well, to make sure that we have a more high functioning society that we can all work and live with it. So this is backed up even today with more recently at TVET symposium looking at the role of TVET. The University of the West Indies identified the sustainable development of TVET in the Caribbean can't be overemphasised. The dynamic and interconnected nature of the world makes it mandatory that TVET is a principal driver in sustainability, progress, and to alleviate poverty and improve quality of life. So we know that TVET means that people are getting the same standard and quality of training and education no matter where they are in the world, and therefore it becomes really vital and important that the skilled workers that are created in the Caribbean are completing TVET qualifications that will allow them things to travel, to allow them to meet the needs of employers and industry. So what are some of the challenges then? Well, the first challenge that we're faced with is that there's often a lack of training for both theoretical and hands-on for staff, and that means that often that an absence of trained industrial experts within the TVET ranks means that the quality of teaching and the standardisation of teaching can sometimes be an issue. So it's really important here when we look at this that we support our staff to undertake the qualifications to the right level, technical qualifications. We'll support them to get back involved with industry wherever possible, because that's the way that they will have that industrial experience. So I think really importantly here, the solutions that are available is, we talked about some teachers possibly not having the right level of training, and make most of the participation in training that is offered by SkYE. SkYE has been offered training for over 2 years now for institutions, and it's really important that you maximise your opportunities for your staff to get engaged in those programmes. And engage your staff in online learning such as FutureLearn. That will allow them to upskill their technical knowledge as well as their pedagogical knowledge in terms of teaching and learning, to allow them to understand what will make them better trainers. So yes, make the most of the training that's available from SkYE, and make the most of any other training that you can find that will support the development of your staff. So keep an eye out for things that opportunities, and try and get more people involved in the training that's been offered in the last couple of years. That's the way that you can help improve the standard of teaching and learning across your institution. We talked here about standardisation, and obviously insufficiently trained instructors is an area that some countries require to improve in, and this can be seen in the fact that in some institutions that people have got CBET training, and they've been trained in the basic methodology of competency training. However, not all TVET centres are the same or have the same requirements. So for example, those people that are teaching in a formal education setting such as a secondary school, there'll only be a small number of people trained in CBET. So it's really important that we try and make sure that people are developing and undertaking the right qualifications, and that you support staff who haven't undertaken a competency-based qualification such as CBET to take the opportunity to undertake one. So moving on from that then as well, is that often quality systems that are in place are basically on the standardised assessments. And the islands face several challenges in delivering a wide range of quality TVET programme. And the reason that we say this is that CBQ completion rates aren't extremely high across the islands, with lots of students not getting the full qualification. And this can be sometimes down to their work getting sent for an external verification towards the end of a programme, but not actually meeting the standards. So it's important that quality assurance systems are further developed. Now, one of the difficulties here is the expense of undertaking quality assurance, paying sometimes consultants to come and externally verify before your work goes to, let's say, your National Training Authority for certification. Now, one of the solutions here is to develop peer relationships with other centres. There's nothing to stop centres from St Lucia partnering up with centres from St Vincent who are offering the same qualification, and likewise with centres from Dominica, let's say, linking together with centres from Grenada. So thinking about centres across the different parts of the region working together to develop peer relationships. So we already heard about centres in St Lucia linking with centres in Trinidad and Tobago, for example. So there are some links already there, but why not further those links to make sure you develop with other centres? Asking those people to check the quality of the work that you're submitting to give you that confidence that it will meet the external verifiers, review at the end. Also, it's important that centres complete work scrutiny. As a manager, you should complete some work scrutiny yourself of assessed work to make sure you believe that it's of the standard required before it goes up for external assessment. And those checks need to be done more early in the programme so corrective actions can be taken rather than just at the end when it's too late for students because they may have left the programme to improve the quality of the work. So standardisation processes probably need reviewing so earlier action can take place. But also I think development of links with other centres is really key and will help move forward in this area of possible issues. Another issue is weak participation from stakeholders. This largely results from the relevance of TVET programmes and the lack of skills from TVET graduates in industry. And what we mean by this is not that they're not developing the skills that are requested on the CBQ, but they're not developing the skills that industry are after. So what industry is saying is if they're involved in TVET, the chances are the graduates will find employment easy to come by. And one of the difficulties that we're finding at the moment is that some graduates aren't able to find employment because the employers do not think that they have the skills that they require, although they've got certification. So it's really important that we do link with industry to make sure that our participants and our trainees are getting the skills and qualities that they need. So what else do industry say? Well, they say there's a lack of link with them, that TVET doesn't always respond to the demands of the market, for example, and many of those that are leading TVET systems don't see industry as partners, but more as a source of funds. And, often industry say that they don't seem to see that TVET institutions have a desire to develop partnerships with them beyond funding. And I think that's something that fundamentally needs to change. We need to get employers on board with programs, program development, assessment development, to make sure that they can see and feel more confident in employing TVET graduates. So I think the issue here is that maybe the institutions are seeing that there's too much of a focus on trying to get funding and money through employers and through industry, rather than looking at the skills that young people need. So I think if we can look at that more on the other side of things, we might see, even see more funding coming forward because they would see that actually the training's been developed to meet our needs. So actually, they're more willing to put funding towards a program. So the idea here is that when we talk about this just in a bit more, detail, the links with industry, that obviously at the moment in the Caribbean, it's a competency-based model that TVET's using. CVQ being the most popular model, and the standards are derived from what identified as skills for the workplace. However, we know skills for the workplace change over time, and what might have been a skill that was required when the CVQ was developed may have moved on. And we know that technology changes, skills changes, and techniques change. So what students have been taught on the programme might not actually be what they're using or doing now in the job. So it's, we know that we need to be more dynamic, possibly, in our delivery and our methods that we're using to make sure that we're preparing students for their next step. So we know that the assessment is based on criterion-based, assessment under conditions, and which are explicitly stated and can be seen online. So, what the problem is though now is that industry can see those skills and qualities that are being put into the qualifications, and they don't recognise them maybe as the skills that they think are required. So what are some of the solutions here? Well, Where we've got weak participation from stakeholders and industry leaders is I think it's really important to involve employers in developing appropriate assessments. So we can ask employers to look at the assignments and the assessments that we're producing for our students and to identify if they think they are the right type of assessments, the assessments that they would want students to be undertaking, and we can develop them in conjunction with industry rather than providing industry with qualified candidates. We can develop candidates that are qualified to industry standard by involving them much more. We also, I think, we could involve employers more in what we call pay it forward talks, trying to develop that relationship with employers so that they coming to talk to students, talking about the successes, talking about the opportunities that are there in the industry and the sector. If we engage employers in that more frequently, they'll start to develop links with students, which should improve employment rates. And finally, what about developing an employer engagement event? An employer engagement event gives you an opportunity to talk about the courses that you're thinking of offering, whether the courses meet the needs of industry, and if possibly, when we look at CVQs, for example, there's a large range of units. We could be asking employers to identify the units that they think need to be delivered from the qualification to meet the needs of what would be making students industry ready. So what are the skills and qualities? What are the units that need to be covered? Often within things like CVQ, there's a range of mandatory units, but then there's also a range of units that you can undertake that are non-mandatory. And within that, we can ask employers to help us select what we deem as the most appropriate to enable students to get employment after. So that would then take away from that where employers are saying that they don't think TVET gives students the skills that they need, because what we could say then is actually employers are engaged in developing these programs, and these programs make you employable, and they make students in this region employable to the sector. So we've specifically tailored our programs to meet the needs of industry. So I think it's a really strong selling point to both students and to employers that you've worked with industry. And when we talk about that, employer engagement events such as employer hubs are vitally important and should be held regularly, maybe at least annually or 3 times a year ideally, and once per term, so that you can get a real flavour to help you with your planning of your programme moving forward. What about the next one then? So the next issue is lack of motivation for students to invest in TVET education. Now, research shows that finishing TVET courses in countries will not necessarily land students high-flying jobs, or they see that as being the case. But students who are offering, TVET institutions that are offering courses relevant to the needs of the market are getting students working to support themselves in these courses. So it's really about offering the right course, I think, is what this message is here. So it's true that computer, accounting, English and hotel and restaurant management courses or similar type courses are the most popular because industry wants them, and in many instances students are hired without even finishing the course because through their placements usually they're finding employment opportunities. And students are likely to invest in these courses and other courses such as this that meet their needs. So it's really important that in developing countries that where it's difficult to attract students, that we look at the courses that we're offering to see, are we offering courses that students will be interested in? Are there jobs in these courses? What are the employment opportunities? So it's not just about matching the skills that we talked about before to the employment and the industry, but also about looking at where what the job market looks like, where the skills shortages are, where are the things that the courses need to be put on for, where would students find employment. So if every centre on the island is offering electrical, will there be enough electrical posts to cover 70 new electrical graduates this academic year? So it's really important to not just plan courses because teaching staff are available, but to also put them on because students want to do them, and the courses will allow you to move forward in terms of employment, graduation. Students will complete those courses, see the value in them. So but getting the buy-in from students will be mainly about where we look at employment gaps and skills shortages. So really those things need to play heavily in terms of curriculum planning and curriculum development. So What can we do to try and get motivated students into TVET education? Well, it's really important that where students don't see successes there, try and get some success stories together. What stories have you got of students that have been really successful in the past? That could be the pay it forward talks that we talked about earlier. What about reviewing your curriculum offer? Is your curriculum offer, going to match the skills gaps? Will it match the labour market intelligence that you have, where the jobs are coming up? Or are you just producing people that won't be able to find employment in that particular sector? Often we might be running courses with very low numbers. Is those numbers very low because students don't know about the employment opportunities in that sector, or is it because they know that there's no jobs there? And if that's the case, is it reasonable to continue running that course at this point in time, and would you not put that back on in the future to allow you to focus your resources and efforts on running courses that would be more successful and would be more popular with students in terms of their participation rate? So one of the other challenges that we've got is time for soft skills development. And research by the TVET journal has identified that unfortunately business representatives in both developed and developing countries say there's quite a large level of dissatisfaction with the preparedness for prospective entry-level employees. And we're talking really about levels 1 and 2, which is what most of the entry-level employees will be going in at. And what they're saying is that they want prospective trainees to have the following skills: work with a team, make decisions, identify and solve problems, know how to obtain and process information, identify priorities, plan and organise themselves, communicate well verbally and in writing, and to be able to influence others. And what they're saying from this journal is that actually a lot of the trainees don't have these skills. And the challenge that we've got is how do we find time to develop these skills within an already busy timetable where students have got to learn the CVQ criteria, they've got to do their soft skills qualification as well. How are we going to fit more time in to develop these skills? The problem that we've got with soft skills being developed as a side qualification is that often it just introduces topics to students rather than fully develops the skills. So what we really need to do is to move these 6 areas into teaching and learning within technical classes to embed soft skills development within technical training. And what we mean by that is that teachers should be creating opportunities within lessons for students to develop skills such as working in a team, making decisions and solving problems, communicating, verbally and written. So what we need teachers to do is we need teachers to plan for the opportunities, give students opportunities to develop these skills within lessons. What we shouldn't be seeing is a teacher talks for an hour at the front of class with students listening and then doing some recall at the end. What we should be doing is we should be doing some form of input at the beginning, or teachers should be doing some form of input at the beginning and making multiple opportunities to allow students to recall and test knowledge, which could be through working within a team, solving problems, identifying priorities, processing information, for example. So instructors or trainers need to be identifying ways that these soft skills can be developed within technical sessions. So really importantly that we move the emphasis of teaching and learning just from the criteria of the CVQ, but about developing a well-trained technical individual who has got these soft skills. And these soft skills will be vital to the workplace. And by showing the importance of these soft skills, I think instructors, and trainees will see how they can link to employability, and that these soft skills are not just a side thing; they're actually part of what it is to undertake that job or that role. I think sometimes the problem we've got with soft skills being developed alongside a program is that students see them as 2 separate entities. And what employers are saying is that while students are coming possibly with the technical skills, they're not coming along with the soft skills that they need to be able to be employable. So yes, they can do the technical task, but they can't work with others, they can't make decisions, they can't influence others, and they can't communicate well. So by those issues being there, it's mean that students aren't often being able to hold down jobs or get a job in the first instance because they might be failing during the interview phase because they're not showing how well they could work within a team or how well they can communicate with others. So it's bringing up potential barriers both for holding down employment but also getting into the sector in the first place. So it's really important that we move this emphasis of teaching and learning to not just criteria-based teaching and learning to meet the the command verbal technical skill that's been required, but also can you do that technical skill and can you do it by by problem solving and making decisions? Can you do it working in a team setting? So what we need to be doing within our assessments and within our both formative and summative activities, uh, make sure that we're testing those soft skills out as well. That we're asking students to do this as part of a team. I'd like you to prioritise this piece of work, process this information. So the more we do it, the more it becomes a skill that students can replicate and do again and again. So it becomes a long-term skill rather than a one-off activity in a soft skills lesson talking about it. Students can actually do it. So, like we said, there's this possible solutions for soft skills. I think reviewing your soft skills curriculum, updating your resources to meet the needs of your students. There's a range of different soft skills curriculums being used within different TVET organisations across different islands, different ways of doing it. You may want to review yours to see what's being shared with others. Like you say, make links with other people as well. Ask them about what they're delivering in terms of their soft skills, how they're delivering it. But I think by integrating it into technical sessions to make it more relevant and meaningful is definitely the way forward to make sure students don't just understand what the skill is that they need, but can actually demonstrate that skill. So I think that's really important that we get teachers and trainees, trainers on board with actually finding and planning opportunities for students and to demonstrate and practice those soft skills within a technical lesson. So the final challenge then that we often face is dropout rate and achievement rate. So within CVQ courses, too many students don't gain a full CVQ. The question is here, what can we do to improve qualification completion? And the dropout rate from programs can be too high, so what can we do to improve retention? So simple things here that we could look at would be to review the assessment schedules and improve clustering of units on assessments to make sure we're giving ample opportunity for students to get as many units as possible and to reduce the burden of assessment both on the students and the teachers. Another important factor to think about here is how flexible we are in our assessment methods. Often a range of assessment options will allow students to be, undertake assessment more quickly, feel more ready for those assessments, and again, reduce the burden on the instructor in terms of marking. So why does all sort of portfolio work have to be written? Could some of it be verbal recorded? Could some of it be the videos recorded, which would allow students to do things like discussions, explanations, descriptions? Does it always have to be done in that way? And if not, is there something we could do to reduce the burden there for both the instructor and the trainee? So that will allow us to get more achievement rates. So ultimately, what we want to see is more students gaining the full CVQ. And unfortunately, at the moment, for two reasons. One is the standardisation we talked about at the beginning, that sometimes the work's going to the end, but not actually meeting the requirements of the external verification or the awarding body. And the other part of it is that sometimes our planning means that we don't actually complete all the units because there just isn't physically time, or that the assessments all get compounded towards the end, which means students feel overwhelmed and decide not to complete them all. So by using those flexibilities in assessment methods and our schedules, we should be able to do that. The final thing about dropout rate is it's really important that centres hold at-risk meetings to support students who are at risk with additional one-to-one and tutorial support. And important that centre heads and managers like yourself know who the students are who are at risk and the reasons behind it, so you can action and implement effective support early to stop those students from dropping out and allowing them to be retained on programme. So ultimately we're looking for high numbers of learners who start completing and those learners to gain the full CVQ, which means that would be what we would call a success. And success rate at the moment on some programs is too low, and managers need to look at programs where it's too low and to identify the features and the reasons why, but also to look at the programs where it's really high and the successes there to see how those can be replicated and shared with those other programs. So it's important that you look at both dropout and achievement rate on programs and identify where your strengths are and where your areas for improvement are. So on this page here is a list of references. You can see some of the research that I've used within this presentation. there's a few links here which will take you to some of the research documents from Cantor, from ResearchGate, and from TVET Journal, as well as UnisDoc from Unisco. Will take you to some of those TVET reviews, and it's really interesting to read some of those reviews. And these, identify similar themes and patterns within the challenges and issues that centres face, and fit in with the discussions and things that I've seen over my 2 years of working with centres about where the challenges are. And I think sometimes we're quite clear on the challenges, but finding our solutions and taking active steps to solve them can sometimes be a challenge. So I think for us to be effective TVET leaders, we can see the vision for change, we know what we want to do to implement change. The next thing is about the knowledge for change, so we know what needs to change, but it's about making that change happen, I think, is the next bit. So please try and use some of the solutions and ideas that we've talked about today, along with some of your own, to make sure that you're driving things forward. And I think that's really important. It's about having we've identified where the issues are, and I think other people and all centres will have identified the issues, but it's about knowing what changes can take place, so coming up with those solutions, but now the task is implementing them. So I think the challenge now, as well as with the leaders, is to find more solutions to those that have been discussed, but also implement your solutions and your changes to make them successful and make sure you improve the quality of education for all TVET students in your institution and across your island. So what can you do to move this forward? Now, self-assessment takes place annually within centres, and often that looks at finances and facilities, and some parts to do with programmes. And I think really importantly, I'd like people to focus more on the shortcomings in TVET programmes and the corrective actions you can take to actually improve the quality of training and education. So I think the main things I would like people to focus on and review are the participation rates of programmes, the completion rates, the transition of graduates to the workforce, but then also look at how many people actually gain employment in the occupation that they've been trained for. I'd like you to look at the TVET programmes and whether they meet the labour market needs. Look clearly about the programmes that you're offering. Think about the programmes that you're offering for SkYE over the next 2 or 3 years, and other programmes that you're offering for other, just for students in general. And do they meet the labour market needs? Will you be overproducing people for jobs that don't exist? Or are there still going to be skills gaps that you need to maybe focus on offering more places and more students through? Think about how well you do promote TVET. Where are your success stories? What information have you got that you could share with others? And how accessible are you? And when we talk about accessibility, it could be about inclusive assessment. So how well do you ensure that you can support students who are on programme to be successful and gain the qualification? And I think that's really important to think about, working with your instructors to make sure your assessments are accessible and inclusive. The other thing is about the quality assurance system. Look at your quality assurance system. How many students do you send off to the final certification that come back with a partial qualification when you were expecting a full? And think about whether you can develop those peer relationships, whether you can do some work scrutiny yourself to check those portfolios before they go, and to try and do that early on in the programme so you can put corrective actions in place. Because actually, if you're paying for a full CBQ review and the student only gets some units, if you then want to put it back in later, it's the cost of those assessments and those verifications can become a barrier to getting as many students through a CBQ as possible. And the final thing is about investment in the training of your trainers. We talked about getting trainers back involved in the workplace, getting trainers involved in training that's available, getting trainers involved in online training. I would urge you, investment doesn't always mean money, but it can mean time. And I think the biggest thing that you can do is give your teachers time to undertake training, but make that time planned, because actually if you have half-day staff development, for example, you'll be able to upskill your staff and you'll know that activity is taking place. So try and plan some training, education and training days, or some education and training afternoons, or regular meetings where you'll undertake some training together. Ensure that when opportunities come up, such as training that's come through different providers, such as teacher training events or things like that, that you give your staff the opportunity to attend those events. Make the most of anything that comes up and make sure that you get as many people trained and involved in those as possible. So there's some of the ideas I think that would make effective self-assessment, but the focus of this self-assessment for me would be not to look at finances and not to look at facilities, because we may be limited to the amount of finances that we've got or the facilities that we've got, and we've just got to think about what we can do with what we've got available to us and think of some interesting ways and strategies around the challenges and issues that we might face. And I really hope you found today's toolkit useful as maybe a starting point or a thinking piece to help you get thinking about some of the challenges that you know of and some of the ways that you might tackle these solutions. So thanks for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed today's webinar, and if you have, this is one of a series of webinars, and I would urge you to watch the others if you haven't, or share those other webinars with other people if you haven't. And the webinars that we've got available that you can look at are effective sequencing, motivational dialogue, knowing how students can know more, do more and remember more, and inclusive assessment. So please have a look at some of those other webinars, and I look forward to seeing you soon.